Hi everyone, I'm BJ. I'm a genealogist here in Maine. And last week I talked about the federal non-population schedules for the federal census. And this week I'm going to talk about state censuses and other types of censuses or census substitutes you might run into. Not going to talk about city directories. They're a whole different thing, but in the near future, I will do a city directories program. Because they're fascinating at how they developed and in a lot of cases ran parallel to telephone books for quite a while, but they maintained a separate presence. So we won't get into city directories. So let's start. Let me share my screen. And do all the various setup things I need to here as things change with sharing my screen. And so I can see the chat if. So some of the state censuses are really easy because they've been indexed at Ancestry. So are you guys seeing Ancestry? Good. So you on some of the state censuses, we can go down here, and we're going to do Warren Poor living in Danvers, Massachusetts. And he was born about 1832. So we're going to hit search and wait. Okay. So what you're going to see here is that this actually comes up very quickly here. This is one of the top half dozen things for him is the 1865 census. And one of the things I really like for Massachusetts is that with the Civil War and so you get 1855 on the state census, 1860 on the federal census, 1865 for state census again, and then 1870. So you get this from 1850 to 1870 every 5 years, and it's around the time of the Civil War. And it's also, Massachusetts started vital records statewide in 1841. So you're getting this really good snapshot in the middle of the 19th century when there's a lot of movement, a lot of change. But it's really nice to have these extra snapshots from the state census. So let's take a look at 1865. And those of you who've been around a while, if you're wondering why this looks familiar, my whole Chasing Harriet thing, this is one of her husbands. So here we have Warren Poor, Harriet Poor, my couple greats-grandfather Arthur Poor, and his sister Laura. And if we click in, one of the things I have noticed on some of these state censuses, they are not as well microfilmed or preserved as the federal ones in some cases. I think they were done because what happened was the federal government was offering financial help to the states to do these. And so I think they were done because somebody wanted the money, figured it was a good idea, but then it didn't have quite the accountability to Washington, D.C., so things didn't get stored as well. But if we look here, you can see it's not much. It's only about what you would get for on the 1850 or 1860 federal census. One of the things I do like is within the state or nearby, a lot of this doesn't happen on all of these towns, but you'll notice here it's telling you which town within Massachusetts somebody was born. or in this case, Exeter, New Hampshire. And so because these are people who were born before the 1841, it can sometimes help you connect someone who's living, say, in South Danvers in 1865 with a christening record in Beverly from 1831 here with Adeline Prescott. So can you see how that can be really helpful to to have somebody tied to their spouse and a birthplace? And so somewhere here, and as you can see, there they are. Warren Poor, his wife Harriet. This is one of the places that I have for her. That's the Chicopee Springfield area. Some of the other things I have for her have her born in the Hillsborough, New Hampshire area. So don't know which one is right. Still working on that. Yes, it has been 28 years that I've been working on this now, but um, so that's one reason I like it's worth looking at these. And you see here you have a James Ramsdale and an Alice Ramsdale born in Maine. And again, it's going to help you connect what few records there might be in Maine at that time to the couple who's living in Massachusetts in 1865. So there we have, yeah, and there's some other stuff interesting here because there are some, this Nancy Henderson shows up in other records, and here you have someone in the same, it's hard to read, in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, in the house next to Harriet. So I just wish they'd done a better job on the Ireland records. That would have made life a whole lot easier for a whole bunch of us. Because the other thing is, remember, this stretch, 1850 to 1870, is covering right as you get the bulk of the Irish potato famine immigrants coming to Massachusetts. So if you've got Massachusetts people in this era and you haven't found them in the state census, you want to go back and see if you can, as you can see, like they've transcribed this as PORR. I, it's again, it's one of those, I can see it both, this one looks like it's, these two in the middle look like they're more poor as you'd expect it, but then the Warren and Laura look like it is more like PORR. So, and you will find both in the federal and the state censuses at this time in Massachusetts with Irish names, they get butchered. So keep that in mind. So some of these you will just find through the little magic boxes. One of the other ways to find them is my favorite research wiki over at Family Search. Come on. Why are you being so cranky? You were good all day. And let's go for Kansas. And again, you have the census there. You get online state censuses listed right at the top. They happen to be at MyHeritage. So you'll find that there's some really interesting places things end up. You also get these lists of all of the state censuses. So it turns out some of these are at Ancestry, some are at Family Search. You'll notice you get pre-statehood. It's not unusual for the states west of the Appalachians, and especially once you get to the bordering Mississippi River or west, to have territorial censuses once or twice in the few years before a place became a state. Because as you can see here, you're not getting like the 1850 census. And so it's worth looking and seeing if there are these just before statehood censuses, because they often also have interesting, um, excuse me, um, so that gives you an idea of what you would get for a state outside of New England. If we look here at back at Ancestry, I put state census, I went into search in the card catalog and I put in state census and I got 402 results. Now, some of these are not going to be relevant for you if you're looking for US state censuses. Some of the other things here are obviously not census records, but they're covering some of the same territory. I'll come back to tax lists. One of the things you can do here, I can filter by location and then by US. And then let's say I want to see what New Jersey has. I can just say I want to see what's with New Jersey. And so here we have the various things that approximate a state census for New Jersey. You will see efforts both for 1890 and for early federal censuses that don't survive, like in New Jersey, it's like 1790 to 1810 or 20. Or some, you also get cases where you have town, county, other records that might be census-like from the colonial era. And so they've gotten all lumped in these reconstructed ones. But it's, or, if you want to just only look at the 1800s, we can do that as well. So this kind of filtering can take you from 402 databases to 29. And then some of these, you can look at and go, my ancestors weren't German Americans, and there are only 283 records in this anyway, so I can ignore that one. And then you get down into some things that are more not records, but secondary sources. But that's the sort of thing that filtering down can help you see what there is. Does that make sense how I did that to everybody? Don't ignore, these aren't perfect, these location and dates, but when you get something where you get 1,573 data sets that come up because you put census in, you can start to narrow down this way. So let's take a look here. This is looking, I put in school census. You will get, again, if you just put in school census, you will get everything that says is relevant to school censuses. But let's say we want to, again, limit it to the US. And you'll see a couple things here. You get a lot of school censuses for Native American reserves, other Native American districts, other types of localities, because you have many of these are federally funded, and so you're getting a state census to check how many kids that the federal government should be paying for schooling. And again, you get territorial and state censuses. I talked about the deaf family ones last week, but let's take a look. I'm going to come back to these. I just wanted to show you in the card catalog, but we're going to flip to Family Search in a minute to look at more of these in detail, but I just wanted to show you you can get some of these at brain cramp at Ancestry. Electoral registers are something we have less here in the US. In the UK, you get printed electoral registers. And you'll notice a lot of these, the date changes starts in the 1830s. There were major changes to who could vote in the UK in the 1830s. So if we scroll down here, let's go into Edinburgh, where my family was. And we're going to put in the last name, Jameson. And let's see if we can pick out my great-grandfather. We are going to add a detail. That's not him. That's him. And, we're still getting a lot of ones that aren't him. And so again, we can, if we go by record date, and we can start looking at not any of these, but just so you can see what these look like, let's pull up one of them. And again, this is a census substitute. And it's just for the person here. You'll notice we're still at the point where it's all men, but you get their address, their full name, their occupation, where they live, and then why they were qualified. At this point, it still has some level of landowning and such, because you'll notice you don't have day laborers here at this point. You've got accountants and gentlemen. Writer to the signet is a legal doctor of medicine, solicitor to the Supreme Courts. You get a few things. You get some well-to-do cabinet makers and such. But this gives you an idea of, but these were done every year or two, which gives you that snapshot between the every 10 years. Does that make sense to everybody? So if David, were these printed in Canada as well, or I forgot to look. I couldn't remember. But you see them for the UK and Ireland. So that's very helpful. And again, you can put in tax records to get similar things where you're getting every year or couple years records. So that's the sort of thing. You don't forget that Ancestry does have a card catalog for you to see what they've got. Okay, so let's click that away. That's not what we want. Got all sorts of stuff up here. Let me get back to what we need. Here we go. Now, so let's take a look at some other things. So again, Family Search. This is interesting. They've got they have microfilm digitized all of the directions to federal census takers from 1790 to 1916. A lot of these are also at places like archive.org and HathiTrust. But if you're puzzled on something, this might have I meant to show you these last week. Um, but yeah, that's nice. So let's take a look at school censuses. And again, here we are at Family Search. I've not put in anything but under keyword, I put school census. And as you can see, there's a bunch of them. A lot of them, as I said, are dealing with Native American populations. Um, so let's take a look at some of these. Um, this is New Haven, Connecticut. Um, these are index cards. Um, and so, and this new icon here means these are now part of the full text search, if you want to look that way. But let's look this way, since this is where we are. And basically, these are the dates they entered school, what room they were in, what grade they were in, father's name, mother's name, place of birth, occupation, kid's date of birth. So if you're looking for Connecticut, as you can see, you've got records from the 1850s to the 1980s. Exactly what's in each of them, I'm not sure. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but Connecticut seems to have kept good records on education. Oops. Here's Homer, New York. Um, and you can see there's transcripts of school records with names of pupils in the towns of Homer and Scott. And so this one is a microfilm reel. It is digitized. You would have to go in and find it on here, except it is also now. Let's do the full search here. So you can see how this is set up. So this is limiting to the full search to just this set of records, not the entire thing. I can't remember. Was this one where I had school down somewhere? Um, but as you can see, let's put in, uh, looks like Hastings is a common name. So you get religious records, no school records. How about Smith? But you can at least look this way as well as going through the microfilm. Looks like it's heavily on the religious records, which may just be what exists. But some of these religious records can function as a pseudo um, census because they may be a list of everyone who's attends that church, is a member of that church, is eligible for communion at that church. And it gives remember, genealogy, we're looking for a particular person, particular date, particular place, particular event happening. And so these religious records can fulfill some of that in place of a census. Um, so that was the Homer, New York. Um, here's one. This is from Huntington. I think it's Kentucky. Um, and these are reports from the trustees. These don't happen to have the kids' names, but what they're doing, they do have the head of the household, in the number of children between 5 and 15, starting in 1827. And remember, 1827 to 1850, you're getting censuses that don't have everybody. So I have used these to correlate between those censuses where you have the little hash marks for number of people and, looking at how that changes between a school census and the federal census. So let's just go back a few pages on so you can see what this looks like. So here we have, this is 1846 for the school district of Cold Spring. So you have all the white families listed first. Widow Brush had 2 kids in school. Joseph Buffett had 5. There were 3 non-white families um, at the Huntington School, at the Oyster Bay School. You get these. And as you can see, these numbers can be helpful for working with the pre-1850 federal census when you've got just numbers of kids. I have worked with somebody where we ended up figuring out there must have been an additional child in a family that didn't make any of the census records. Now, whether it was a child who was that family and died, or whether it was like a cousin living with the family or wife's youngest sister, we couldn't tell. But looking at the hash marks in the federal census versus several years of school census returns like this, it's clear that it took us several hours of work, but it was clear that there was an additional person hanging out, you know, child hanging out in the household. You do want to make sure you read the directions on these because I've seen them 4 to 14. I've seen them 4 to 16 years old. I've seen them say, you know, children who are not the children of the parent, who are a sister-in-law, nephew, cousin living there are pulled out separately. Other times it's all the children in the household. So if there are directions, you want to read them. But, again, this is not everybody in the town. It's only those who have kids who are in that 5 to 15-year-old range. Um, where are we? So here's Glastonbury, Connecticut. There are school records for them, and I was not finding my way back to them when I went to look for them today. Um, but I have worked with these, so I know they're there. Um, but there are other things here where you will get things lumped in with other stuff. And I think that's how I found the school records here. And I'm just not remembering how I did it. Um, but it's worth looking. So here we have Rowan County, North Carolina, which is interesting. You have it's the Board of Education. You'll notice that even though emancipation had happened in 1865, African American students aren't recorded until 1883. Um, Again, they're on microfilm and they're in the full search. And this one we're going to take a look at just because I want to point this out. Notice it says item 3, which means if we go in this way, and it's often not this clear, but that's one reason when I saw this, I was like, this is going to be one of the samples. So here's item 1. Come on, where are you? Somewhere here, there's the end of item 1. Beginning of item 2, somewhere. gonna be a ways down, I think. But you'll want to scroll through when you see something is only one item on a roll. You will want to scroll through and see and find the right item. Um, and so this doesn't tell us what this is. This looks like it might be names of the children. So here's one that's done by family. So here we have this Belk family. Mikkel Belk is the father. Um, you get these other family. Here's a Goodman family. Um, this looks like it may have gone up to 20 or so for here you have a Mrs. Joseph Sherrill as the mother. And then you have Lucy, Russell, Carl, Lena, and Price is the kids. But again, this is I'm not sure what date this is, but it's helping put together families. Let's go back to the film. Let's see what else we've got here. So yeah, here's a school census record from 1900. So we're still in Rowan County, North Carolina. Um, and this family has um, 3 kids. And what's interesting is you'll see here there's one with a different parent or guardian name. And so you'd want to take a look at these to figure out exactly what they're recording. Is it a family? Is it a very tiny town? This looks like it's for the African American students. And so you're getting just African American students here. But they're at least recording the names. So yeah, here's the Rowan. And again, you can limit this to um, just this one for the so let's if we put in here Bell as the name, it'll find all of the bells in this particular microfilm set that's been digitized. Does that make sense how you do that? You go from that icon that means full text search and you get what looks like the full text search, but down here they've taken the this image group number and you're only searching that particular image group, not all of these, and not all gazillion full text search records. So you're not getting people if you're looking in North Carolina, you're getting North Carolina and not Massachusetts or Texas. Um, let's take a look at this one. Again, this is an item 3. Oh, maybe this is the one where yeah. So here, this is item 1, and you have item 2, and then you have item 3. Most of you probably know this, but I wanted you to see that. And if you want to go back to that other view, you click here and you get this. And again, you get the school census with names, ages, male or female, parent or guardian, and so on. Now, the other thing to notice is don't panic here. Notice this says Hebrew Benevolent Society up here. No, we're still looking at those, what was it? Montana school censuses. That Hebrew Benevolent Society is on one of the other things on that film. And so that's where it's pulling that from. Because notice you've got one, there must be, maybe it's number 6, because notice that there's no number item 6 there. Looked at that one already. Tax records, like electoral registers, can help you narrow down when and where somebody was living, or at least owned property, or otherwise had some asset that was being taxed. So some of these, and this is one of the reasons I've been encouraging libraries in Maine to become family history library affiliates. Here's one. This is Middleton, Massachusetts, 18th century tax records. A huge number of the people who settled in Maine after the Revolution and up through the 1820 came from places like Middleton. And you'll see here, it's got that little thing saying it's locked and you need to be at the family history library or a family history affiliate. So if your library is not one, go talk to the reference librarian, the assistant director, the adult services person, the director, president of the board of trustees. It's free to be a family search library, and you would get access to these records at your local library. So you don't have to go to Salt Lake City, or you don't have to find an LDS church that has evening hours because you work full time. And they're volunteer, so they tend to be open from like 10 a.m. to 1 on Tuesday. But we'll back up. And come on, computer. Because the other one here, why is this taking so long? We'll try going this way. Okay. But if we look at the other one, this one is not locked. And so it can be used to look at tax records for Middleton in a period where there's, you don't have censuses. You have 1790 in this time period. And so these can help you with movement, when a son turns 21 or whatever here in Middleton, there was a tax that young men started paying at 21. So you can see men's aging into it. And then at some points in colonial Massachusetts, you stopped paying taxes at 60 on certain things. And you can see men aging out of paying taxes. So militia rosters can do the same thing for you. But when you're at a point where there aren't many records, sometimes something like, hey, he started paying taxes in this year, and 39 years later he stops paying taxes. Well, we can figure out when he turned 21 and when he turned 60, because those were the rules on taxes. That makes sense to everybody? Plus, taxes are collected in a lot of cases in colonial Massachusetts twice a year. Or you have the colonial tax in 1 month and the county or town tax 3 months later. And again, sometimes I've been able to work with somebody and look at a tax list and go, he's here in February for the colony tax, but he's not here in August for the town tax. Where'd he go? Or did he die? So yeah, there's let's see, that's more the Middleton we can get rid of. And again, a lot of these you can find, the problem is a lot of the tax records are local or county, and a lot of those aren't built out as well at the wiki. There just aren't the number of people to do it. So I tend on things like school censuses, tax records, voter registration lists. I tend to start with the catalog by the place or by the type of item. Um, and one last little bit I want to show you, just to show you a bit outside of the country. This is Scotland's People that has the Scottish Archives records. And you can look here, and the valuation rolls are essentially what they sound like. It's how much property do you have to be taxed. So let's take a quick look at these. And what they've been doing, because the UK takes their censuses in the years ending in 1, they've been putting priority on some of these, putting these up for years that were in, halfway between the censuses. So let's take a look at 1880 or 1875 and look for, yeah, that'll work. And we're going to go with, not sure where they were at that point. I think this is him. I have credits, don't I? Yes. That's actually not him, but he's the brother of somebody I'm interested in. So we'll go ahead. Yes, I want to purchase this. And so again, you get the house and garden house, whatever the property is, who owns it, who's the occupier, and then if the occupier sublets, which happens, that's here. Now, in this case, the occupier and the tenant are the same. Often you will see, so and in this case, the person who owns the property, the occupier is also the occupier. But again, this is for 1875 to 1876. So there'll be another one of these a year later for 75 to 70 or 76 to 77. And so you can see and you get an idea of the rent. So those are kind of fun. And then to wrap up, one of my other favorite categories of tax records in Scotland. There were in the in about the 1790s, certain, if you had servants, you were taxed on them, how many you had. It was looking at, generally it was considered the non-essential ones. So if you had a sort of maid, cook, cleaner, you didn't pay taxes, but if you had a cook and a housekeeper and 7 maids, you ended up paying a tax. So if we look in the virtual volumes, this is interesting because you get all sorts of taxes and so on. That so let's go down to the tax. Oh no, that's what I wanted. Yeah, so they taxed carts, they taxed horses, they taxed various other things, and over a 20-year period. So you can, with these, especially if your family was sort of middle class or upper middle class, this is right before the good records start for Scotland otherwise. But as you've heard me say multiple times, money generates records and it generates records that are kept. So that's one reason it's always worth looking for tax records. Now, in my case, my ancestors are the young female servants who are being taxed, whose employers are being taxed. But it's one of the few good sources outside of church records for women in Scotland in the 1790s, um, along with the valuation rolls. Um, so I just wanted to show you that other places have similar records. Um, Sometimes windows were taxed, and so on. And those records often you know, were kept. Um, so let's see. I think that was all I had put together. Yes. So again, not a lot on any specific place, I know, but one of the things you find as we get down into these things that aren't the federal census, that aren't vital records, that aren't military records, what you can find varies widely from place to place because of what records were generated to begin with, which records were kept, which ones were deliberately destroyed, and which ones were accidentally destroyed. You know, we all talk about the 1922 fire that did in a good chunk of the Irish census. That's true, but a couple years worth of the Irish census had actually been deliberately pulped by the British for paper for World War One. So that's a case where it's some accidental and some deliberate destruction of records. And so, when you get to the point that most of you are at, where you're looking for things that aren't the big data sets, like the censuses and vital records and military records, you're going to half the trick at this point is to find what records there were, what survived, and where those surviving records are and how you can access them. Because, some places did school censuses. Other places you are going to get predominantly churches that kept good records of who was eligible for communion. There's some denominations where you said you were a Christian, you could take communion. The Presbyterian churches in Scotland, you got a little token that you were eligible to take communion. And so there were records around that. So that's a lot of the stuff where you're trying to find things to supplement records like the censuses. You're going to need to do a little of this poking around, and see what there was. Any questions at this point? Okay. Well, yeah, so a lot of this is me just trying to poke you guys into thinking about what there might be. I'm actually talking to a friend. We're thinking of developing, you can get a lot of really basic variations of genealogy forms and worksheets online, but a lot of them are not ones that encourage you to analyze what you're collecting. And so we're thinking about, we may put together some forms that we sell, PDF that you can then download and print, with things like, comparing 2 or 3 census years and seeing what change, and then at the bottom having space for, here's the changes, here's a question I have because of this. Who's missing? That, a lot of people take down the data and then don't stop and think, who should be here? Is that 16-year-old daughter in domestic service, or did she get married, or did she die? But she was here as a 6-year-old. So that's what I'm encouraging you guys to do at this point is it's great to put in the magic boxes and keep going back further and further. But on the ones where you're struggling, or you're interested in all the family in that particular town or whatever, take some time to stop and say, what other records might be quirky that this town or county or state colony kept that I'm not expecting, because I'm used to researching in New England and they did things differently in Kentucky or Georgia or Utah. So, this is meant to be sort of thought-provoking, thought-prodding.
It,
Go take a look.
it's working.
And
I've
what I
just
didn't mention as much here, but I've talked about recently in the past, you know, email and call local historical societies. There are historical societies where people have amazing amounts of stuff in their head about what records are available, but it hasn't made it into a book because it's 3 ledgers somewhere, and you know nobody's thought to go to East Podunk Historical Society and you know deal with those 3 ledgers. Yeah, Wayne, do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't, it's not so much that I had a question. You've poked me, and I'm realizing there's things that I have not made use of as much as I should have. And I'm looking at the family search catalog and I'm going, there's a lot of stuff there that I've never even touched. And I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed.
Yeah, no, it's always, in fact, one of the things I want to do if we do these forms is a sort of how to start a location guide.
Mm,
You know, is there a historical society for the town, or is it only county? You know, is there a local history collection at the local library? You know, and have you gone and looked at what's there at Family Search for this town and the county it's in? Just to
yeah,
remind you to do that at the beginning to see if there
yeah,
is, because we've talked about it before. I have found ministers' journals. Martha Ballard's diary is a pretty unique example, but you get doctors' journals that
yeah,
again, and it's the equivalent of 2 notebooks at the historical society. And so neither Family Search and Ancestry are not fighting over going to some small town in Kansas or northern Maine to find these 2 volumes of the doctor's records that might have a birth date for your ancestor
yeah,
from before vital records were required. You know, I'm sure there were doctors keeping notes in Maine in the 1870s and 80s that had birth dates. Now, a lot of those are either still in private hands or they've disappeared into somebody's attic and gotten eaten by mice and they're no longer there. But on the other hand, when someone was leaving Maine to move out to sunny California in, 1967 with their family and selling grandma and grandpa's farmhouse, they may have taken a box to the local historical society of stuff.
yeah,
And this is where the internet's great because you can dash off an email, you can go see if the historical society has a Facebook page and ask a question. There are groups for some towns and counties where you can ask a question and people will answer that, oh, there used to be a Presbyterian church out there, and those records actually, the minister left to go to the Presbyterian church 2 counties over, So you might want to check there too in case he took some of his records with him.
You know, I mean, I work at
Local
the,
knowledge is something that is very helpful. So, well,
I volunteer at the Ellsworth Historical Society, and almost weekly we're getting stuff coming in, diaries, photographs, all sorts of things are coming in, and we're putting it into our great big database and, creating a
yeah,
file.
and one of the advantages to digitizing in this day and age
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm the one
is,
doing that.
there's accessibility
Yep,
because you can throw it up on a website.
yep.
And if you I have a thumb drive here that holds a terabyte of information.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Wow.
literally a thumb drive the size of my thumb that holds a terabyte.
Wow.
They're not selling it anymore. I keep looking because I'd like to get a second one.
This
Yeah.
this is
Um,
256 GB, which at the time was great. Now it's not much.
yeah. But it does mean that small historical societies, if you can digitize things, don't necessarily need to, you probably want to keep the physical object, but you may not need to keep it in an accessible way.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have aisles that you can get down. You can shove things in boxes in a closet now, but people can still access the data from a scan.
Hmm.
So, okay. Good to talk to all of you, and we'll be back next week.
Good, and
I
I hope
think next week I'm starting the vital records, um, which I've been promising for a while and I'm still working on. Um, it's a big topic, and I don't want to just be theoretical, but at the same time, I want to have some of the story of why things changed and how that changing society has changes in society have changed how we keep records. So that's what the vital records is going to be. It's going to be some of here's sort of a timeline of what you could expect when blah blah blah, and but also here's why some of why these changes were made. So um, so I will see you next week. Cheryl, I hope your recovery keeps getting better.
Yep, me too,
And
hon.
I'm just at the, I know for me, I'm at the breaking point, but just in amusing side, I made two calls today that I thought were going to be horrendous to deal with people. And they were both really easy. And both women I spoke to were named Robin.
Ah, what are
And
the
two
chances?
completely different,
Yeah.
but so, I just thought it was an interesting coincidence that two Robins. But yeah, life is never simple. But
Yep.
No, it's not.
I hope you
genealogy
can
is a
get
good escape from reality.
I
Yes, it
hope
is.
I hope you can find
Um,
rides to the places that you need rides to.
I'm working on it. There
I
are
wish I
people who
lived
are
anywhere near
helping.
closer. I'd help, but I'm a little
I
bit too
know.
far away.
Yeah. Um, and but yeah, genealogy is a good distraction.
True.
True.
So take care. And oh, my other thing, um, family tree webinars, Webtember stuff.
Hmm.
They're doing Wednesdays. Is free through the end of the month. And one of the Wednesdays was all German. And I know a couple of you have German ancestry. So
And even though
worth,
the date has passed, you can still see it for a period
yeah,
of
if you
time.
go to their website, they're free until they're doing this month-long thing. So they're instead of a week, they're all free till the end of the month.
Oh, great.
That's
And
good.
yeah, there was one that was quite simplified, but if people are interested in different types of writing systems, there was one done on that, syllabaries versus alphabets versus, you know, logographs and such that was really interesting. So
What is their website again?
it's just familytreewebinars.com.
Family Tree Webinars. Okay.
Yeah. And generally around Thanksgiving or just before Christmas, they often do a half price sale. So you can get a membership for $25 instead of 50 for the year. 50 is already a good deal. If you
Yeah.
watch one live, there's a discount code at the end that you can get it for 45 anytime. But certainly if you can swing 25, you get it's like 2,500 webinars now and like 10,000 pages of syllabus material, handout material to go with
Yeah,
that.
syllabus, good.
And, Cheryl, if you don't have a membership already,
I do. I believe
Good.
me. I'm using it.
and, they have, it's Elizabeth Schoen Mills did 2 years of Family Tree webinar exclusive stuff once a month.
Wow.
Judy Russell,
Yeah.
Blaine Bettinger, all of the big names.
Yep.
Warren Bittner's done some stuff on Germany. Ari Wilkins' stuff, even if you're not interested in African American genealogy for your own sake, her look at the culture around some of this and things like gradual emancipation are worth watching just for how she's using these records when there aren't very many of them. And some of the techniques she's talked about, I have adapted for looking at Irish and Eastern European Jewish records in terms of the interaction with DNA and looking at how to reconstruct families when people were almost deliberately separated,
Mhm.
which happened both with the famine and in Eastern Europe for Jews as well as with African Americans. So, okay, so that's my little plug for, I have no, vested interest in it other than I'm all for good genealogy education and they do it. So
Okay.
take care. See you next week.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.
Enjoy this
Next
fall weather. I'm
weekend.
loving it.
Okay. Bye, everybody.